Here this morning to introduce our speaker is Stacy Cognetti from Lackawanna College.
Thank you all, and good morning. Dr. Lisa Mae Norton is the Dean of College of Health Sciences and Education at Misericordia University. With a distinguished career spanning more than 25 years, Dr. Norton brings a wealth of experience in higher education administration and a strong commitment to advancing social justice and fostering inclusive academic environments. Prior to joining Misericordia University, Dr. Norton served as the Dean for College of Education and Health Sciences at Touro University. Her tenure there was marked by her leadership in enhancing student support services, securing grants for mentoring programs, and spearheading strategic enrollment management initiatives that significantly improved student retention and success. Dr. Norton's scholarly and professional interests are heavily rooted in student success, especially for her diverse population of women in higher education. Her research is distinctive in that it is entrenched in feminist theory and incorporates creative ways to present research in higher education, including visual imagery, poetry, and prose. Dr. Norton received her bachelor's degree from the University of North Texas, a master's degree from San Francisco State University, and a doctorate from the University of Texas at San Antonio. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Lisa Mae Norton.
All right, I'm going to try and see if I can get this to work. All right. Can you all hear me? Here, let me move it up. All right. Well, what a, powerful introduction, right? No pressure, especially after coming out of a presentation, a keynote on clear, concise communication. So first of all, can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. And I'm going to see if this clicker works. Let's see. It was just working. Any tips? Do you want to come mess with it? All right, I'll go ahead. Just like the last presenter said, I'll go ahead and just get started. So first of all, thank you all for coming to the session, one of the first sessions at 10 a.m. I am so excited to be here and to really, this is actually my most fun presentation I've done in my entire career because I get to talk about my two loves, which is higher education, and I get to talk about punk rock music. And specifically, I get to talk about female punk rock music. So how many of you out there are punk rock fans or music fans? Raise your hands high. Hopefully most of you are like music in general. Great. How many of you have listened to punk rock music in your lifetime? Okay, awesome, great. And then how many of you listen to a lot of female musicians or female punk rock bands? Awesome, so I am in good company. It is so exciting, like I said, to talk about this. And I'm gonna talk about this not only from my love and how it really empowered my authentic leadership, but I also wanna talk about this because I think there's so many qualities of female punk musicians that really embellish. And the one thing I want all of you to get out of this presentation is really what are those unique, amazing values about yourself that are different and similar, and how you take those and really lean in on your leadership style. So I think it's so important, and it took me 51 years to develop my own authentic self and feel comfortable in my skin and who I was. So I'm hoping we get this up and running because the visuals will be very instrumental. We're getting there. But there's a picture that's about to come up that is going to be one of my favorite photos. And it's of female punk rock musicians from 1980 in London. And so it's this group of, the women that came together, Chrissy Hind from the Pretenders, and then we have Blondie, which by the way, today I'm wearing my Blondie sneakers, and so my cons, and I'm also wearing my Joan Jett shirt because I just went to the Joan Jett concert at the Kirby Center in Wilkes-Barre. Any of you there at the session? I know one person, woo, right. It was amazing. What an amazing show. And we were commenting, she's such a small person, but she has such a huge personality. So wonderful to do that. So this picture, once it comes up, it's got Susie Sue on there and then several others. So are we making any progress? All right. Because we're going to start with a video. That's the plan. So you all can kind of hear what the influence is of this. It was just working. So we're going to start. How many of you have heard of the band called The Runaways? Ooh, there we go. This is perfect. Great. Starting to work. How many of you have heard of The Runaways? All right, so someone in the room that raised their hand that's a brave soul. Who are The Runaways? Any volunteers? Joan Jett, right. What else about The Runaways do we know? Sorry, you're going to be my students like in my classes. Anything else about The Runaways? All right, you're like, that's why I'm here, is to learn. So that's the picture I was talking about at the beginning. So just to finish up, so we also have Viv Albertine, who is from the Slits, which was a very famous punk band back in the 70s. Susie Sue, you all may recognize Susie Sue and the Banshees. At the front is Polly Steering from the X-Ray Spec. So she was the first African-American first black singer that was a punk rock back in the 1970s. And then on the end is two-tone. So that was actually ska, because ska had such a huge influence on punk rock for those of you that are fans. So I'm going to play just a short clip of this, and I'm hoping it's going to work okay. If we could play maybe 30 seconds of this video. This is the Runaways in Japan in 1977. And for those of you, the quote on the bottom, you may recognize from Joan Jett, "Bad reputation. I don't give a damn about my reputation. We're living in the past, it's a new generation." So, but we're going to actually play a different song called Where the Boys Are. Can you play it? You want me to just hit it? Whoop, nope. Nope. All right, there we go. Can you hit it? There may be a quick ad, sorry, with YouTube. Not going to work? Okay, we're going to keep going then. So anyway, this song, and I'll give you the actual lyrics to it. Give me just a second. So the lyrics to this song, and I wish you could hear it, but it's called, "I want to be where the boys are. I want to be where the boys are. I want to fight how the boys fight. I want to love how the boys love. I want to be where the boys are." So when I was young, kind of growing up in Houston, Texas, and we'll talk a little bit about my personal story, this was kind of my genre, is like I was a tomboy. I hung out with a lot of the boys and girls in the neighborhood, but I was the boss back then in my neighborhood, and I really wanted to do the same things that boys did at the time. So that kind of was my frame of reference. How many of you know who this is up on the screen? I mean, it's kind of obvious because it's got, so photographer, what's your name, photographer? Amy, who is on the screen? No, that's actually Patti Smith. Yep. So Patti Smith was actually considered the godmother of punk. And the reason why she's the godmother of punk, because if you've heard her before, sometimes her music can be a little bit more on the folk side of things. But it's because she was one of the first female musicians in New York City to get out in the East Village and start to write her own music and perform. And she did this kind of individually with support from other musicians, but she has a lot of courage. If you have not read her biographies, I absolutely recommend. There are two of them in particular. This is one, but she really talks about her life and how she came into being. They're short and they're a great read about leadership. And one of her lyrics that I put on the board is, "The power to dream, to rule, to wrestle the world from fools." So this really impacted my lens on leadership as I was growing up. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Riot Girls in 1990s. How many of you know what the Riot Girls are? Okay, we got one in the room. Anyone else? Okay, I got a couple more in the room. So Riot Girls had such an amazing impact when I was in my 20s. And so the Riot Grrrl movement was really a reaction to some of the male-dominated spaces in music, and specifically in rock and roll, but also in the punk rock scene that was evolving. So it came out of the Northwest, kind of Seattle area, but it was characterized by, of course, music and bands, so as a lot of all-female bands or female leads. And then there were bands like Bikini Kill, Bratmobile, Sleater-Kinney, which were really central to the movement. There's another band I'm going to show in a minute called Babes in Toyland. And their music really addresses issues such as sexism, racism in the scene, sexual violence, and female empowerment. So today it's so important because we're all here to dream big about female empowerment and how we move into the next wave of female leaders. And I'm specifically talking about higher education. They had a do-it-yourself ethic. So a do-it-yourself ethic is really they approached a do-it-yourself approach. They created zines and art and music. And so because of this movement going on when I was just starting college as a first-generation student, it really empowered me to join bands. University of North Texas, where I had my bachelor's degree, was a music school, for those that don't know. It has a lot of jazz, liberal arts. And so I was around musicians and artists all the time. I studied psychology, so I kind of helped all my friends that were artists and musicians. But I also inspired me to play drums and sing in a band. So, and really it's like grassroots activism. And then they tackled really tough topics, such as rape and domestic abuse, patriarchy, and classism. And it was really about the community and activism and how important it was to get together with females and really empower each other to make change in the world and create a safer place, especially in the music scene, but in general in the community. So here are some really powerful images of some of my favorite bands. So up here is Babes in Toyland. It's my husband's favorite band. Bikini Kill, and then Bratmobile, and then we have Sleater-Kinney. For those of you that may not recognize the face at the end, Kathleen, this is Kathleen Hanna. On the end, she is in Portlandia. So the lyric at the bottom is from Bikini Kill. So it's become kind of an anthem of the Riot Grrrl movement. And it says, that girl thinks she's the queen of the neighborhood. I got news for you. She is. So it talks about a woman in her neighborhood that was kind of considered tough and do her own thing and was very influential on this movement. So she wrote a song about her and the importance of it. So I want to kind of go through the qualities of female punk rockers and some of the values that I think I want you all to kind of think about. And I want you all to put yourselves in the shoes of what is it about yourself that maybe is the punk rocker in you and how it influences your leadership. So some of those qualities are, being creative, definitely with problem solving, being a visionary. So we talked this morning about, Geisinger. I've met Dr. Byerly. She's an amazing human being. And so she talked about one dream of one woman. And so punk rockers, especially female punk rockers at the beginning, were visionaries and saw a different way that music could be. They're authentic, so they're really authentic to themselves, and they talked and sung about very personal issues in their own lives that matter to them. They were about collective resiliency. So they're definitely resilient as human beings, but they're also collectively resilient in communities. And that's really where resiliency research is going, by the way, is how do we create communities of support. They empowered other women and empowered other communities. They were brave. They were fearless. So they really got out there at a time where, to be honest, they had a lot of backlash. I mean, a lot of musicians in the field, they would go to punk rock shows, they have stuff thrown at them, names called. So they did things in an environment that was not the easiest environment to be in. And they were always advocates for equality. So it wasn't just about, white necessarily punk rock females, but it was also about how do we embrace equality, both of other races and other genders, but also in the LGBTQIA plus community. And then they had a cultural impact. So it had such an influence, obviously, on my life, because I'm up here talking to you all about why this is important. but I think it also had an influence into the future for women musicians moving forward, as Joan Jett. So now I want to talk a little bit about research on diverse women in higher educational leadership. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. My research specifically has kind of focused on women's empowerment and leadership in higher education, but I specifically looked at Latina development because I actually grew up in Latinx communities. I'm not Latina myself, but that was kind of my cultural upbringing. I worked for a large Hispanic serving institution, UTSA, UT San Antonio, for about 10 years, and I got my doctorate there. And one of the things I started to examine is why are there not more females, first of all, in higher ed leadership, talking presidencies, provosts, deans. But I also was looking at why is there really a lack of diversity as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some statistics, and I have a few charts for you too. I'm like, give me just a second so I can pull down my notes a bit. So when it comes to female presidents and research on diverse audiences, so currently there was just an article that came out that 60% of those graduating from college are identify as female. So 60%. So we have seen a surge of women coming into higher ed and completing their degrees. Higher education, currently only 32% of presidents at community college, four-year universities, research institutions, only 32% are presidents. So there's a huge discrepancy there of like who is leading and then who is actually coming through higher education. Female presidents are also paid 0.9, so 90 cents to every dollar that a male president makes. And if you look across, when you look at positions like mine, academic deans, you look at tenured faculty, you look at provosts, that's pretty on par. Women are still not making equity for the same position as their male colleagues. And then only about 5% of women that are in these positions are actually women of color. And so it's like, this is not to be a Debbie Downer, or a Lisa Downer, but it's really to talk about where's the issue and how do we change the scenario? Like, what are the steps we need to take to change that? So in moving forward, let me get back to my slides. So I know this is a little hard to read, so apologies, but statistics don't lie. So this is just showing how many 18 to 24-year-olds from 2012 to 2022. The left side is males, the right side is females. So you'll see as a whole, females are starting to enroll in higher ed at higher rates. And you also see there hasn't really been that much change besides Asian females in growth in higher ed enrollment. And then we look at statistics don't lie on the gender gap that persists in US universities in leadership. So you'll see kind of the green or teal is male presidents, and you'll see men of color are in blue, and then women of color. So when we look at across presidents, academic deans, tenured full professors, what's obvious? What's obvious there? Where are the women? There's a lot less percentage of women in here than there are of males, than there are males that are here in this. Although women have earned the majority of bachelor's degrees for the last 40 years, they have received, for the last 35 years, the majority of master's degrees and doctorate degrees. So even though our numbers are increasing of women that are educated, we're not seeing this necessarily translate over into faculty, academic deans, and presidents. And then lastly, I kind of spoke to this a minute ago, but this is kind of the pay ratio. So for every dollar that a male makes in these particular, there's deans, full professors, associate professors, assistant professors, women make less than $1 on that. Now, what this also shows is that when you have women at institutions who are provosts, so they're kind of second behind presidents, you see that start to shift a little bit. So I think when you have representation, you have people in place that are looking at these statistics, looking at this and going, okay, how can we make a change? How do we get equity and pay for the positions? So I now want to just talk briefly about strengths and challenges of women in higher ed leadership, and kind of what are the things that they currently bring to the positions, and then what are some of the challenges that are happening. And so we have strengths. So this is across literature. This probably came from about 50 different articles that have been done about women in higher education. And so their strengths are, I don't think this is a huge surprise, that they have more empathy skills, so they lead in a different type of way. They're collaborative, so they want to work with others and help others. Very innovative, problem solving, so they think outside the box. They're advocates, especially for other women, but just advocates for those with less power in the system. And then they're collectively resilient. So I'm going to keep talking about this collective resilience. So together they build pathways to success. And they're also mentors. So I know I've been a mentor to many, many, many women and girls in my life, and so that's kind of a strength. They see the importance of that. Now, some of the challenges are systematic challenges. We talked a little bit about that. Balancing responsibilities. Not to put anyone on the spot, but to put you on the spot. How many of you have children? Okay. How many of you are the primary caretaker in your family? Okay. And I know that's shifting a bit, and that's good. You know, it's a good thing. But that becomes an issue, and it can become a barrier of why women aren't progressing in the higher ed system into tenure track positions. Because some of those responsibilities fall more heavily on the female or the woman in the relationship. There's definitely, as I pointed out, still underrepresentation of women in higher education and in those lead positions. And there's bias and stereotypes. Because I remember someone had told me, oh, Dr. Norton, you're way too touchy-feely. You're too touchy-feely. You care too much. And I'm like, so this is a weakness? You know, the fact that I really care about my students, I want them to succeed, I care about my employees, I love my faculty. And it was posed to me as a negative thing. And which I think is completely not true. And I don't want to say that every woman has the same leadership style I do, you know, and I want to recognize that. And then they have networking challenges, which I showed in the last 3 slides. When you don't have as many women that are networking you through, it becomes harder to have more women come into leadership. And so despite progress, women in higher ed still face barriers. And I'm not going to provide a ton of statistics, but I do want to provide some statistics because I think it's important to know. And you know, I'm a dean and I'm a nerd, so there's been a recent article that came out literally March 14, 2025 by the National College Attainment Network. And there's this stereotype going around, well, there's all these women in college, so what's the problem? There's more women in leadership, what's the problem? And it overlooks key disparities that women are facing. When there's twice as many male professors as there are female professors on whole in the college system, that while women are more likely than men to take on student loans, so 71% to 64%, and some of this has to do with the caretaking role that they play. And they graduate with an average debt of $7,000 more. So that immediately is creating disparity. And even after earning degrees, as I showed earlier, they may not be making the same as their male counterpart. And I don't think this research is probably vastly different across other industries, although changing. And I think it's really just taking at the policy decisions and institutional support, in higher ed specifically, but really recognizing the barriers that women face. And it becomes harder to advocate for necessary reforms if we don't have women in power. So increased financial aid for women, stronger mentorship programs, better representation in leadership roles. And so I'm going to very quickly, because I want to give time for you all too to give some input as well. This Roots of Inequity started over 200 years ago. So Oberlin College was the first all-women's college that came into existence. So 200 years, college was for males, and males only, and in particular, affluent males. So women were behind by 200 years in getting higher ed education and getting into professions. And so during the Civil War, there were only a handful of colleges that allowed women to enroll. And then after the war, they started to see more of a need for women to be in the workforce and to be in the community. So we started to see the emergence of women's colleges. And so we have between 1836 and 1875, there were about 50 women's colleges that erupted across the nation. And then over time, we saw that blossom into 230 women's colleges. So across time. And what this provided to women was really a supportive environment to be the person they wanted to be, to dream big, to focus on their needs and what the fields were and get them ready. And so today, I want someone in the audience that's a brave soul to guess how many women's colleges are in existence right now. Now, in this point in time. So we had 230 probably about 20 years ago. Who said that? What's your name? You are so close. So it's 32 right now. And unfortunately, they're closing by the day. I'm very proud because I work at Misericordia, which was actually, we just celebrated our 100-year anniversary. And I'm the Dean of Health Sciences and Education. And we were started as a women's college. We are co-ed now because we felt some of this pressure back in the 1970s. But the Sisters of Mercy, you know, they are, you want to talk about resistors? You know, they really saw there's a need in this community to educate coal miners' daughters. And so we're going to come, they came from Ireland, Catherine McCauley, and they decided we're going to start a institution in Dallas, Pennsylvania, right outside Wilkes-Barre. And what's hilarious is they were not allowed to actually purchase that land. They had to find male counterparts in the community that were willing to do that because they didn't even have the ability to buy the land. And so now, many of you know Misericordia is a pretty thriving institution with lots of programs, not just in health sciences and education, but across business and other fields as well. So, and really part of a strong reason of why I came to the northeastern Pennsylvania area is because of the value systems. So I'm not going to go over all because I feel like I don't want to keep on such a negative trip, but this is some of the new articles that just came out about where are the women presidents? You know, where are women? How are we going to move this needle? How are we going to move forward? And that I just did literally before the presentation. So this is new data that's come out, or new articles. So how do we kind of change this? So now I'm going to shift gears and really tell you just a little bit about my story and how I came to be and how punk rock influenced my life and my value system. So I'm actually from Rochester, New York. My dad worked for Kodak. He got transferred to Houston, Texas. And I grew up in Houston, in the suburbs. This would be like my album if I had an album. So I was a first-generation college student. We were pretty low income. I would say I was low income until probably about 10 years ago when I actually came into administration and was able to kind of own, because I've kind of been the breadwinner in my family. I was a tomboy. I mentioned that at the beginning. I totally started doing activism even when I was a junior in junior high. So I tended to gravitate towards those that were different from me and that I felt like we needed to work together to make a difference. And so that kind of passion, because my parents always encouraged that in us. College was a breakthrough for me because I finally got to a place where it was so diverse, so many cool people, and I really took advantage of those things. And then that started my pathway to leadership. And as you all know, I absolutely love music. Music is a part of I wish I had a soundtrack going. In fact, I found an awesome women's punk rock soundtrack that I will send to anyone in the audience if you want to hear it. It's on Spotify. It was amazing. I listened to it the whole way up on my drive. So my story, these are just some of my credentials. So I'm not going to go into the credentials so much because those are important. And so yes, I've worked really hard, and I worked really hard to get to the place that I'm at. But there were also great mentors in my life that helped me. And ironically, some of those mentors were women, some of those mentors were male. So I had to find mentors because it wasn't always easy. And so eventually I got my doctorate and I went through a Harvard management program. That's me and Dr. Chris. She is my absolute mentor in my life. She was my doctoral advisor. She's an amazing human being. She was so excited to see I was doing this conference today. So she does research on women's leadership. These are some of my friends. And Rhonda across I played in bands with. And that's me in my little San Francisco days where I was playing music and thinking I was all that. So But this is my true life education. So we definitely learn through school. So school is important. I couldn't be in higher education and not believe in the impact of higher education. But some of the other education experiences I had was I did play in bands as a very bad drummer, so I'm not a proficient musician. My husband is an amazing musician. And so, but I did play because I loved it, and it was fun, and it was an outlet for things that were going on. I sold my car, and I backpacked 10 countries for about 3 months, and that had so much influence on other cultures and other ways of being that really stood out to me during my 20s. As I mentioned, I was a political activist, still am a political activist, very proud of that, and community activist. I was a leader in student life, so I was very involved in college, both college, my master's degree and my doctoral degree, and I was working. And I've worked since I was 15 years old. So all that added up to bring me experiences that made me who I am today. And so these are drums and me with pink hair and, again, being my punk rock self back when. And I'm definitely not going to go over all this, but this is the start of my higher education experience about 26 years ago. So I literally took a job as a graduate recruiting coordinator to recruit college students into master's programs. And I took that job back in 1999, 2000. I took that job because I wanted to get my teaching credential at half off, because before this career started, I was actually a mental health counselor with children for almost a decade, and I was also a kindergarten teacher for a stint. So that had a lot of profound influence on my life as well, working with kids that needed great mentors in their lives. And then I fell into the job in higher ed. I always tell that story. And I was going to get my teaching credential for half off, and I loved what I was doing. And then I just kept doing it. And then I got better at it. And then I had other opportunities. And one of the things, I actually don't have children myself. That would be a whole nother presentation of that journey and struggle. But because of that, it allowed me to be able to move kind of around and to look at different options for myself. So the picture up top is my husband and myself, and this was last commencement. I always have to wear regalia for commencement, and I speak at commencement. So he always takes a shot of that. This is me. The third picture is with my parents. And then the fourth one, which gives me chills every time. So our commencement at Misericordia last December, we had Mary McAleese come. So she was the second president, a female president in Ireland. Sorry, I'm getting chills right now. And so she came and she was our keynote, and she is she's a president of a university now. And so I was like, please take a shot with me. So it was great to see other female leaders. And then lastly, I'm doing a time check, because I know we've got about 7 minutes or so, but bringing it all together in our authentic selves. So some of these pictures are my family and my career and my dogs and my sister and I and my husband and I, and all the things that are around me that really made a difference to my leadership. My sister is she's 4 years older than me. She works for Penn. She's absolutely my first mentor in life. She's an amazing human being and introduced me to really cool bands too. So I got to give her credit where credit's due. And we were at the Himalayan Institute at a retreat, plug for Himalayan Institute. It was an amazing rest and rejuvenation retreat recently. So as I mentioned at the beginning, it took me literally 51 years to be brave enough to come in front of all you all and let you know I was a punk rocker. I embrace that in me. I have tattoos, I keep them hidden, but a lot of the things that I was so afraid for people to find out about me or the values that I carried, I hid those things and I wore masks. And I know sometimes that's necessary. I mean, I don't think if I hadn't done that, I'm not sure I'd be this far. But I've come to that part of my life, especially it's an interesting time in our world right now that I'm like, I'm gonna be who I am, and I'm going to impact that on others. So I want to encourage all of you to definitely be who you are and provide the values that you bring into your day-to-day work. And if you want to go into leadership, we need some of you. How many of you are leaders in your fields? Everyone should raise their hands. And how many of you would like to progress in leadership? How many of you want to progress to be the top dog in your organization? I'd love to see a few more hands up in the audience, because that's what I'm here encouraging you to do. Because if you had asked me when I was in elementary school or junior high or high school, you're going to be a dean one day, I would be like, first of all, I didn't know what that was. I had no idea what that was. And I would tell you, not me. There's no way I'm going to be a dean. That's the man. I'm not going to be a dean. I'm not going to go that way. And then over time, I realized the reason why I chose to keep this progressive pathway is because you have so much impact. Like, I'm standing in front of all of you. I know there were like 31 that were supposed to come to this, and it looks like there's more than that. The fact that I can tell my message to others and say, each one of you could be the top dog, the top lead in your organizations, and we need you to be, because the numbers are still not showing. So we need you to think about it, and we need you to consider it, and I need you to consider it, because I need a successor when I'm to the point where I'm retiring, and I would love it to be someone completely different from me and not the same as me. So moving forward, I want you all quickly to think about what are some examples of your female punk rock leadership in your own life, or what are those things in your life that are that make you you and make you bring that into leadership. And I want to encourage you to do so and to not wait till you're 51 or 71 or 21. Start living it, because it's going to take all of us to have that risk. And some, it's a higher risk than others, and I get that. I understand. We've seen it. We've seen it in the news. We've seen female presidents be grilled and leave their positions. So I'm very mindful, especially women of color, but I think women in general, especially, in my opinion, in this environment. So I was going to play this awesome video by the Linda Lindas, and so they are a brand new, fairly new punk rock band that came out of Southern California, all women, and it's a song called "Growing Up." And so some of the lyrics are, "Growing up isn't something we can make happen when we want to, but since we're growing up together, I guess I'll grow up with you." It's the sweetest video, so please go out on YouTube and look it up. We can take turns taking the reins, lean on each other when we need extra strength. We'll never care or we'll never waver, and we'll always become braver and braver. We'll dance like nobody's there. We'll dance without any cares. We'll talk about problems we share. We'll talk about things that ain't fair. We'll sing about things we don't know. We'll sing to people and show what it means to be young and growing up. So I want the next phase of female punk rockers, and I wanted to show you the video, but it's okay. Go and look it up on YouTube, because we need to inspire the punk rock in all of us. So I want to thank you all for the time spent. I don't know if there's time for questions.
A couple Q&As. There we go. Sorry, there are a couple Q&As in the app, so do you mind taking some questions, Dr. Lisa?
Absolutely, yep.
All right, so our first question is, who would you regard as one of your favorite leaders, and who helped to shape your leadership style?
So, and I'm not trying to sound cliche, but my leader, my older sister, was definitely such an influence. She was my first mentor that really showed me what it meant to be cool, and then also what it meant to get out there. She works for Penn now. She runs big medical grants. So I think the leaders don't necessarily have to be the Joan Jetts in life, although I love Joan Jett, and I just got to see her, and it was but there are other leaders in your life, your family members, your aunts, Mary McAleese, who is further away.
Thank you. And then how do you respond? You mentioned earlier that you have been challenged about your empathy and your kindness toward others as a leader. How do you respond to those people who think that may be a weakness and not a strength?
Sure. So the one story I didn't tell is I did empathy development in children in my original research. So in my master's degree program, I looked at how do we develop empathy in children. And I looked at San Francisco. I was in San Francisco at the time, and I evaluated some school districts. So what I would say to them is, don't you want your children to be in an environment where they feel loved and cared for, not bullied, and feel like they can succeed? And why would you create an adult environment that was any different from that, And I am a dreamer, and some say I'm a Pollyanna, which that also gets on my nerves. But I think that, we want to create the environments. We want to create those environments for children, and we want to create that environment, in our workplaces. And so there's no flaw in that, I'm not saying there aren't other things in leadership that are important, but why wouldn't you want to create a workplace that people care about each other? Why wouldn't you want to have where people can really have their dreams live big and really encourage that in others?
Awesome. Thank you. And then we had a request for that Spotify. So we do have a chat, and I will get not only the link to the Spotify,
Okay,
but
sure.
also the link to the videos that she was going to show us, and we'll put them in the chat for you all. But thank you. Let's give Dr. Lisa another big round of applause.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much. And it's been a pleasure. What a great, this is my first Empower conference too. So I'm so excited for the rest of the sessions too. And any of you, feel free to reach out at any point, especially if you're interested in higher ed journeys or any journeys in leadership. Feel free. I'm happy to help in any way I can. Thanks, everyone.